What's up, Internet? SP here for the Marduk Report, and today we're taking a look at a rather interesting ITX case. Today we have the Pi from White Knight. So White Knight is a manufacturer out of China that I had never heard of before, and I doubt any of you have ever heard of, but it's a really interesting looking case, and I came across it while actually looking for a new enclosure for my HTPC. And it was a toss-up between this and maybe about two other cases. But I decided that this was so unique looking that I would just pick one up and give it a try. So without further ado, let's go into this review because there's a lot to unpack with this case. I'd like to make a quick note before we actually get into this review of this case. There are two different manufacturers that I've been able to find that make this exact same case. There's White Knight and there's iMagic. And iMagic seems to be the much more popular in terms of search results that you'll find on the internet, but they're almost the exact same case. There are a few very small things, but nothing that actually changes the design of the case. So the iMagic brand comes from Korea, while the White Knight comes from China, and the iMagic brand has a white colorway, whereas the White Knight does not. And you'd think it would because White Knight, cut the whites in the name, but no. Also different is the price point, and this is huge actually. The price point of the iMagic Pi is around $130 US, where the White Knight Pi is about $60 Singapore, so about 40 bucks. I don't know why there's a 300% markup because it comes out of Korea, but that's a lot of money for no real reason. Also, the White Knight does come with a power supply, which I will be talking about later, while the iMagic does not. So taking a look at the design of the Pi, you'll notice the very first thing that it's very, very, I mean very similar to a Mac Pro. So take that for what you will. That's either really positive for you or really negative. I thought it was kind of interesting that it's a round ITX case. So I was like, all right, yeah, let's go. Let's take a look at it. Now there are three materials in the finish from top to bottom. There's a soft touch plastic on the top and bottom. You have your aluminum sides and a shiny, normal glossy plastic strip running down the middle in the front. And there's a shiny plastic shroud of some sort on the rear. So you notice that this is the matte black version. There also are two other colors. There's a gold, of course, and a silver, like an aluminum silver, bright silver color. Both of those are actually glossy cases, and the matte black is the only finish that is actually not glossy. So the dimensions of the White Knight Pi, because this is actually a very small case, it's about 200 millimeters in diameter and about 275 millimeters in height. I'll let you guys translate that to whatever measurements you're used to using. Looking at the features of the Pi, things become a little more obvious that this case is much more aligned with the thought process of you get what you pay for, because the feature set in this case are very, very slim. Cooling in this case is handled by two 120 millimeter fans. They're both red LED. In the case of the matte black finish case, there's one mounted in the center and the top and one mounted on the bottom and the top. If you get other colors of this case, the silver I believe has blue LEDs and the gold has, I don't actually remember what the gold has, but it has a different color. On the top mount I/O panel of the White Knight Pi, it is actually super simple to go over because there really is no I/O on the top. On the top you only have a hard drive LED, power button, reset button, and a 3 fan speed controller, and it's only 3 speeds if you count off as a speed. So really 2? The power supply that comes with the White Knight Pi is a 230 watt power supply that has a 20 plus 4-pin ATX power connector, along with a 4-pin CPU connector, 3 SATA power cables, and 1 4-pin Molex for legacy reasons. And drive capacity for this case is 2 drives. It supports one 3.5 inch hard drive and one 2.5 inch hard drive of up to 9 millimeters in height. Inside the case, the motherboard is actually inverted so that the single PCIe slot is actually at the top. But because of where the case puts the motherboard tray, which is actually directly down the middle of the case, The card that can go into the PCI slot is really, really limited and can only be a max height of 60 millimeters. And to be honest, any card that you buy that's that small, there's no other nice way to put this, just gonna be a waste of time and money. So this is not the case. This is not a gamer case. It's that simple. Like, I really wish that this was, but it is most certainly not for gamers. The power supply is, I guess, kind of a freebie. Like, I wasn't expecting a power supply, and the power supply that is included, it's kind of rubbish, really, to be honest. Like, it works technically, but there's some glaring flaws with it that we will talk about momentarily. So this power supply is actually rated for 170 volts to 220, which I have no idea what country uses 170 volts. Like 110, easy. 220, okay, I get 220, 240, I got that. But where do you use 170? Like, if anyone knows, let me know down below, because I'd like to know, actually. So the other really big glaring issue with the power supply is that it doesn't have any kind of intake fan. Like, it's completely sealed up. There's only one 60 millimeter exhaust fan on the back. And this is a real issue because it sits directly on top of the CPU cooler, like directly on top. And because of the fact that it sits on top of the CPU cooler, that means that your CPU cooler clearance is limited to about 60 millimeters as well, which is really, really tight. So the reason that there's the single 4-pin Molex, even though practically no case uses that now, is because of the fans. The fans included both have 3-pin headers, but there's only 2 wires in each of those 3-pin headers, so it's only positive, negative, and then those headers are connected to a Y connector, which then takes the 3-pin fan header and turns it into a 4-pin Molex, but it only has 2 pins in it. So why? On the subject of the fans, the bottom of the case does have case feet, like any case does, but they're so short that it feels like there's barely any space, even sitting on a desk, for air to get underneath. So in this case, I would probably actually pull the fans out. Well, pull the fans out no matter what and replace them, but I would make sure that we're actually using the top fan as an intake instead of an exhaust. I know heat rises, but in this case, there's not enough space on the bottom to actually pull in cool air. So really, you'll want to pull in cool air from the top down and have the bottom as your exhaust and just blow out all the hot air that is getting pulled into this case. So the build process for this case is actually super simple and takes maybe about 20 minutes, 30 minutes tops. Basically, there are 4 screws that hold on the side panels, and they're not thumb screws. They are Phillips screws, so we'll need at least a screwdriver. Once you have the sides off, which actually hinge in that skinny plastic strip that's in the front, that's where they hinge. Pull the sides off, put in your I/O shield on the back, and then motherboard, which you should already have the RAM and your CPU and CPU cooler already installed, because there is no CPU cutout on the back of the motherboard tray. So you have to have everything installed before you actually put the motherboard in. On the back side of that motherboard tray is actually where your hard drives will go. So drop in at least 1 hard drive or SSD, route your SATA cables underneath, and then you want to install your power supply and route the SATA power cords to the hard drives underneath as well. The motherboard tray here is actually raised a little bit closer to the top than it is to the bottom of the case, and that's really because so that you can pass cables underneath. I don't think it's high enough to actually fit any kind of slim AIO, like all-in-one liquid cooler, but maybe like a Corsair H60 could work. But like I said earlier, like, this case isn't the most well thought out. The power supply sits so close to the CPU cooler that it pretty much gives no room for the CPU cooler to exhaust any of the heat. All of that heat that it's blowing off literally just hits the bottom side of the PSU and comes right back. So your CPU temperatures are going to get jacked really, really high up. On the back side where the actual ATX power connector is for the power supply, in that 60 mil fan, there's nowhere for that fan to exhaust. So that's another huge problem. Like, why is there no ventilation here to get air out? Everything's supposed to either go out the top or out the bottom. Like, that's ridiculous, especially with only these tiny and very inefficient 120 millimeter fans. I understand like that normally 120 mil fans are completely fine for getting air in and out, but because there's so much more stuff in here, like there's really nothing else going on the top or bottom of this case. Like, these could have easily have been 140s or even 200s top and bottom. If these were 200s top and bottom, this case would be so much better. Like so much better. But you know, this is what we have to deal with. So in conclusion, so to wrap this up, what do I think of the White Knight Pi? It's okay. And by okay, it means it's not really passable. It's a really good concept and it's a really good idea to make a case that looks like this. I think it's super stylish and would look really good on a desk. It's too small to really put on a floor, but on the desk I think it would look nice. But there's some serious design and feature flaws that just mar this case completely. And so there's no way I could actually recommend anyone to buy this case unless you're a modder with a lot of tools, or you need a really low power system with no GPU. Even then it's still a maybe, because you're gonna have to buy an SFX power supply, which is gonna be anywhere from 80 to 150 bucks easy. Plus you're gonna have to get new fans because the fans in here are junk. Like, toss them. So with that, I would give the White Knight Pi a wait for the next generation.